Once you have your horse and owner information entered into your database and that horse appears in your current horse drop-down menu, you are ready to set up a trial collection. Be sure that you are working with the appropriate set of sensors. If you change the set of sensors that you are working with, the current horse field will become blank, and that is to prevent you from collecting data on the wrong horse. So if you do change the set of sensors that you're working with, you'll just have to reselect that horse from your drop-down menu. Select Connect to Sensors, and you will see they will go through some Bluetooth connection processing here in this window. If there were an issue with connection, for instance, if you did not have your Bluetooth receiver plugged into the tablet or one of the sensors had turned off, then it will give you a message that it could not connect to one of the sensors. So those would be the two things that I would check first. I would, as a third measure, check that you are in fact working with the correct set of sensors if you do happen to have more than one set with your system. When you are connected, you will see three color-coded bars in each of these channels. CH1 is the head or halter sensor, CH2 is the right front sensor, and CH3 is the pelvic sensor. Fully charged sensors will appear with green bars, moderate charge shows in yellow, and low charge will show as red. If you are in the red, you probably have enough time to finish the collection, the trial that you're working with, and it is advised to then put them on the charger for a few minutes at least to get adequate charge to finish what you're doing. Once you are connected and you see your color-coded voltage here, you are set to initiate data collection. So you're going to hit the start button to open your Enter Basic Trial Information window. So you need to select something from the trial drop-down menu, and in most cases you're going to work with these first three selections: straight line, lunge left, and lunge right. But there are also additional options of a before flexion, which would be a straight line, shorter data collection, since you only want to look at a few strides rather than 25 recommended strides for a typical data collection. So we label that separately so that you can identify it as a flexion baseline. And then you have your post-flexion options here. But again, in most instances, you're going to use straight line and lunge left and lunge right. If you wanted to add additional comments such as the surface, this will not affect the way that the data is analyzed. It simply would provide a note on the report of the surface that you are working on. If you were blocking the horse, you would select first the limb that you were working on, and either fore or hind limb blocks will appear as options. So we have nerve and regional blocks at the top and intrasynovial blocks on the bottom. Another thing to note here is as you begin to block the horse and you check off what you have done, each subsequent trial, that previous information will be stored for a certain period of time. So whatever you started with will be the default, and you can simply continue to move up the limb or however you're choosing to block the horse. Those previous blocks will remain checked for a certain period of time, and they will show up on the report as well so that you can look at it and know all the blocks that you did previously. And then if at any point the lameness changes to a different limb, you simply select a new limb and you can start blocking that one, and it will also retain the original limb. So you can track a multi-limb lameness situation. Blockage you will just leave as The default, you do not need to change that. Just going to unselect these here. And location, probably don't need to use that much, but if you wanted to make a note about the location you were working at, and also any additional notes, perhaps you wanted to make a note about the horse if it was acting up, or you needed to sedate it, or there was a rider on, you could do so there, and that will also appear in the report. But the only necessary option from this window that you must choose is one of these options from the trial dropdown. And as soon as that's selected, the OK button will become activated. And upon selection of that, you will see you are now collecting data. This is raw data, so there's nothing about this data in particular that will provide you any insight to the lameness. However, a couple of things to note are, one, that data collection is occurring in all three channels, which, as you can see here, it is. And all three channels are synchronized very closely with each other. So this is what a typical data collection would look like as the horse is trotting. And if it stopped and turned around at the end of a jog strip, it might look something like this, and then it's trotting back to you. You do not need to select the pause button when the horse stops and turns around. Lameness Locator is equipped with certain algorithms that will filter out non-trotting strides, and to some extent you can adjust the selection of strides that are selected for analysis as you're running the analysis. But you can just let this go, and the user who is operating the computer simply needs to note that the data is being collected in all three channels. If for some reason one of the channels was showing as a flat line, then you would want to stop data collection and investigate that. And again, the second thing to note is that the channels are synchronous. If the horse was to get out of range, perhaps beyond 100 meters from you, you might notice that one lags behind the other, and you would want to move closer to the horse before you stop data collection so that those signals can catch up with one another and the data can be analyzed appropriately. If you started data collection here and you weren't actually ready to trot the horse, you could select the pause button until you were ready to trot the horse off, and then reinitiate data collection by selecting the start button. Another purpose for the pause button is perhaps if you were lunging the horse and the horse was trotting nicely, and then all of a sudden it acted up and started bucking and cantering and carrying on, you could select the pause button until the horse calmed down and resumed trotting, and reinitiate data collection with the start button. So the goal here is to collect approximately 25 strides, with at least 6 strides being continuous strides before the horse stops and turns around. So if you are working in a shorter jog strip area, you do not need to collect all 25 strides in one direction. You can trot the horse down and back twice, 3 times, whatever it may be, in order to collect approximately 25 strides. You just want to get at least 6 strides in one direction before that horse stops and turns around. You want the horse to move off briskly, and the handler should have a reasonable hold of the head without so much hold that it's inhibiting the natural head movement, but it is helpful to have enough guidance of the head so that the horse is not really looking around, and that you're keeping the head relatively straight. When you are finished with your data collection, you can select stop, and the Amend Trial Information window pops up, which is the same window that you started your data collection with. And if you wanted to change anything here, you could. You could add a note if you desired, but in most instances you are just going to analyze the data. So at the bottom here, you have several options. Save and Analyze Now is what you will use the majority of the time, and that will immediately launch into the analysis once you select the green Go button. Other options here are Save and Collect Again. This will allow you to save the data that you just collected, but it will not launch the analysis. It will set you back up, reconnect you to your sensors so that if you wanted to set up another trial quickly, you could batch collect trials, and then you can go back into your trials and analyze them at a later time. Save and Disconnect would save the recently collected data and leave you disconnected from your sensors. That is not a commonly used option. Discard and Collect Again. You may use this perhaps when you have a situation where you start data collection and the horse acts up, or you can't get it to trot, or perhaps it just explodes and you need to get things calmed down and you just know that's not going to be an appropriate data collection. You can discard that and it will set you back up, reconnect you to your sensors so that you can get into another trial quickly. And lastly, Discard and Disconnect will discard the recently collected data and leave you disconnected from your sensors, and that is also not a very commonly selected option. So by selecting Save and Analyze Now and selecting the green Go button here, you will launch into the analysis, which will be covered in the next tutorial.